The shootings started almost a month after Election Day. They began on the afternoon of December the 4th in Albuquerque, New Mexico, when a gunman fired 8 rounds at the home of Adrian Barboa, a Democratic county commissioner. 4 days later, on December the 8th, multiple shots were fired at the home of Javier Martinez, a Democratic state representative. His garage was struck and damaged by the gunfire. 3 days after that, on December the 11th, another Democratic commissioner, Debbie O'Malley, found her house peppered with a dozen gunshots. And then earlier this month, another shooting. This time, at least 9 rounds fired into the home of Democratic State Senator Linda Lopez. A month after the 2022 elections, as lies about voter fraud continue to swell in far-right media, after years of threats to election officials and to civil servants, police were on the hunt for an armed gunman targeting Democratic officials. And now they say they have their man. Meet Solomon Pena, 39 years old, a convicted felon who already spent nearly 7 years in prison for burglary, larceny, and contributing to the delinquency of a minor, and who made a failed run last November for the New Mexico legislature as a pro-Trump Republican candidate. Police now say Pena paid 4 armed gunmen cash and, quote, sent text messages with addresses where he wanted them to shoot at the homes of local Democrats, most of whom Pena had confronted at their homes after he lost his election bid in a landslide of 47 points. Because according to police, quote, he had complaints about his election, felt it was rigged. He approached all of these commissioners and the senator at their home with paperwork claiming there was fraud involved in those elections. To be clear, this guy's explanation for losing by 47 percentage points is fraud. Of course it is. When his election conspiracy theories went nowhere, he not only paid those gunmen, allegedly, to hit the homes of Democrats, police say he participated.
On the last shooting, we now have evidence, too, that Pena himself went on this shooting and actually pulled the trigger on at least one of the firearms that was used.
How? How did an apparently disturbed ex-con, whose felony record might have made him ineligible to serve if he was elected, how did this guy even end up as a Republican candidate for state office? Well, when asked about that by a reporter during the campaign, Pena responded in a text, quote, I stand with Donald J. Trump. I don't want anything to do with you. In this case, Pena was being literal. He stood with Donald Trump on January the 6th, 2021, at the Stop the Steal rally in Washington, D.C., the one that led later to the Capitol insurrection. Here was Pena on Twitter, proudly posting a photo of himself on that Washington trip. Just last November, a week after he lost his House race by almost 50 points. 2 days after that, Pena posted one of his last tweets, a photo of him in a Trump-autographed MAGA hoodie. Trump just announced for 2024. I stand with him, Pena wrote. I never conceded my race, now researching my options. 2 weeks later, the shootings started. It is January 2023. We are 2 years after that insurrection. And we have to have another serious talk about the big election lie, the conspiracy theory that Democrats are stealing elections, whether with Italian satellites or Dominion voting machines or bamboo ballots. It is like every other conspiracy theory, whether it's about the moon landing or Tupac's death, laughably stupid. But it's also very different, because the big election lie is a conspiracy theory that leads to real-world violence. We saw that on January the 6th, and we've seen it ever since. A study last year by the University of Chicago's Project on Security and Threats found that 21 million Americans believe both that Joe Biden is an illegitimate president and that force is justified to restore Donald Trump to the presidency. We saw pro-Trump incidents of violence last summer in the lead-up to the midterm elections, along with warnings that the former president's angry words could still spur real bloodshed. It was a point that was made on this show many times by many of our expert guests over many months.
Donald Trump incites political violence.
And even telling people, if you beat up protesters, I'll pay your legal fees.
That's a reference to a Donald Trump quote that they continue to reference. You know, when the looting starts, when the looting starts, the shooting starts. That was a widely known meme in this space now. That's what's happening.
It isn't hyperbole to say that he's inciting and radicalizing people.
They're playing into the hand of these types of narratives that fuel this extremism that drives political violence.
When Donald Trump said one of the most truthful things he ever said was that he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and he wouldn't lose any supporters.
Yes. Guess what? a majority in the House of Representatives, including 10 Republicans, agreed with that when they impeached Donald Trump for inciting a violent insurrection to prevent his own loss of power. Donald Trump and his MAGA movement, as we have pointed out on this show, as I have said, as my guests have said, they pose a violent threat to the rest of us. And let me be clear, there are not two sides to this story of political violence in America today. No matter how many tales get spun about Antifa super soldiers and Black Lives Matter and woke armies, this is far-right, pro-Trump violence, and not just against Democrats, against democracy itself. Look, there is one horrible and terrible incident that Republicans always cite from 2017 when a gunman opened fire on a congressional softball game, wounding GOP Congressman Steve Scalise. That shooter, who was killed by police, reportedly volunteered for Bernie Sanders' 2016 presidential campaign. See, what about Scalise, they say. The thing is, Sanders didn't incite that shooter. He swiftly denounced that shooter. And there haven't been a series of left-wing shooters since. That is the truth. Republicans can cynically use the horrible attack on Scalise to try and both sides political violence in America. But here's what's actually on the other side. Let me just quickly run through a whole host of pro-Trump people who've carried out violence since Trump emerged on the political scene in 2015. And I'm not here even counting the hundreds of convicted insurrectionists from January the 6th. Give me 60 seconds. Start the clock. In 2015, there were the Trump supporters, brothers Scott and Steve Leder, who attacked a homeless man in Boston thinking he was an immigrant and told police Trump was right. In 2016, there were Trump supporters Patrick Eugene Steen, Curtis Allen, and Gavin Wright, convicted for plotting a series of bomb attacks against Somali Americans. In 2017, there was Trump supporter Alexander Bissonnette, who murdered 6 Muslim worshippers in a mosque in Quebec City 2 days after Trump announced his ban. Also in 2017, there was Trump supporters James Field Jr., who crashed his car into a group of people protesting a neo-Nazi rally in Charlottesville, killing 32-year-old Heather Heyer. In 2018, there was a Trump supporter Cesar Sayo, the MAGA bomber, who sent mail bombs to more than a dozen people, many of them prominent Democrats who had been demonized by Trump. In 2019, there was a Trump supporter, Patrick Carlinio, who was convicted for threatening to murder Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. In 2020, there was Trump supporter Barry Croft Jr., the last of 4 accomplices convicted of a domestic terror plot that involved trying to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer and spark a violent uprising. In 2021, there was Trump supporter Brandon Hunt, who was found guilty of threatening to kill members of Congress 2 days after the January 6th insurrection. In 2022, there was a Trump supporter, Ricky Walter Schiffer, who was shot dead after he attacked the FBI's Cincinnati field office with a nail gun, apparently because he was mad about the FBI search of Mar-a-Lago. And now in 2023, there's the arrest of Trump supporter Solomon Pena. That all happened. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. It feels like you'd have to be a crackpot conspiracy theorist to deny any of that. And yet denial of all this violence from pro-Trump people, incited by Trump and his allies, remains the default setting for so many GOP officials. At what point do we say the obvious? That denial of violent acts by people on your side, coupled with a refusal to even condemn them, is complicity in that violence. Joining me now are Jared Yates Sexton, co-host of the Muckrake podcast and author of the new book, The Midnight Kingdom, A History of Power, Paranoia, and the Coming Crisis, and Olivia Troy, a Trump critic who served as a Homeland Security advisor to Mike Pence in the Trump White House. Thank you both for coming back on the show. Jared, let me start with you. You've covered the rise of Trump. You've connected his authoritarianism to your own family's evangelicalism and conspiratorial thinking. You've written an entire book about all this. What goes through your mind when you hear about a person like Solomon Pena, a pro-Trump election denier, a former candidate who hires gunmen to shoot at Democratic lawmakers when he loses an election in a landslide?
Well, first of all, I am completely disturbed by all of this. And my thoughts keep going to the people who had to suffer this act of terrorism. I mean, it's getting to the point now where you don't even know why somebody would elect to serve, why somebody would run for office when they're going to have to deal with their families being threatened. So true. But I also want to point something out here. It's not just that this base is being radicalized, which it is, but we also have to look at someone like Solomon Pena and think, what kind of people are being attracted to this at this point? Because this is attracting violent, dangerous, criminal-type people. So what we're actually watching now is a base that has been prepared to be radicalized, and a lot of people who are looking to either get in on the grift and or the authoritarian energies on the ground.
Yes, indeed. It's a good but an apt combo you summarised there between the grift and the extremism. Olivia, as a lifelong Republican and a Homeland Security analyst, if I tell you that a man who was at the January 6th rally, a convicted felon, ran for state office as a Republican with party support, lost by 50 points, organised attacks on the homes of Democrats, how do you even begin to explain that happening in the party that you came up in, and how much worse can this get?
Well, I think there's a direct correlation between the leadership of the party as it stands right now. And look, a lot of this is Kevin McCarthy's feckless leadership and all of these other enablers who stand by and watch this happen, who repeat these lies, who repeat the lies about the election, who repeat the lies about the great replacement theory. That's something but it's all part of this strategic narrative. And Jared's right, it's about the grift. They raise money off of these sentiments. They push these narratives. Look, I've gotten emails lately about conspiracies, and this is what it is. It's about fundraising and power at whatever cost to the national security of our country. And I think we're going to continue to see this happen again and again.
And Jared, police in Albuquerque had been investigating not 4, but 6 shootings at Democratic homes and offices. They said on Monday that the 4 cases Pena is implicated in don't include reports of shots being fired near the former campaign office of the New Mexico AG this month and at the law office of another state senator in December. You said earlier, you're disturbed. How disturbed are you to hear that it wasn't just Pena allegedly doing this? There's somebody else out there shooting at New Mexico Democrats, perhaps without any coordination at all. That's pretty chilling. I mean, it reminds me of how on January 6th we had all those armed insurrectionists, many of whom have been prosecuted, but still no word on that pipe bomber who's out there.
I think a lot about how people who are focusing on this and actually paying attention to it, we're not surprised by any of this. That's what's most disturbing, is that all of this is inevitable. We know what happens when we spread these conspiracy theories, when we convince voters and people that they're engaged in a life or death struggle against supernatural or satanic conspiracies. I mean, when it really comes down to it, if you believe what is being peddled here, and it is consistent and constant, and billions of dollars are being used to spread these lies, if you truly believe this, then it's only inevitable that you're eventually going to pick up arms and start declaring actual war on people. So I'm most disturbed by how inevitable this is.
Yeah, I think the inevitable word is exactly right. When we talk about Trump inciting things, I mean, we don't have time or inclination to go through every single one of his social media posts, but the language he uses is insightful, is inflammatory. He doesn't stick within what might have been called normal political discourse. We know that, and sometimes we laugh about it, but we should be disturbed by it. Olivia, Republicans argue that there's lots of leftist violence, too. They cite the Scalise shooting in 2017, as I mentioned a moment ago. They also cite the man who was arrested near Brett Kavanaugh's home last year. And those cases shouldn't be trivialized. We've covered them on this show. We've condemned them. But what do you say to conservatives who argue that this is a both sides case and that the threat of violence from the left is equal or greater to that coming from the right? I mean, you worked on this stuff in government in a Republican administration.
Yeah, look, Mehdi, I just saw your clip talking about all the incidents that happened. I worked on most all of those situations, and in every one of those, it was coming from the right. And so while there are few and far between incidents on the left, we cannot both sides this at all. This is a problem that is increasing, and it's happening on the right, and it's being perpetuated by people on the far right and also mainstreamed by Republicans who know better than to push these lies, who know what this leads to. And it's one big combination, by the way, of dangerous propositions here going on. And it's also, look, it leads to the increase of hate that we're seeing in our country. It's leading to the increase, which is leading to the increase of anti-Semitism in our country, which is leading to increased gun violence in our country, which we shouldn't forget about and they don't want to deal with any of this. All they do is perpetuate these lies. And so now, we have Republicans who are in charge of Congress right now. And what are they doing? The first thing they do is the weaponization of the government, right? They're putting ideas in Americans' heads, and they're turning people against the Department of Justice, against our law enforcement agencies. And that's why you see these attacks on these agencies. I mean, that is all related to these narratives. And what do we have now? We have Marjorie Taylor Greene sitting on the Homeland Security Committee. And as a national security person, I can't tell you how appalling it is to see this happening.
Olivia, just on Marjorie Taylor Greene, let me just follow up on that. She's on the Homeland Security Committee. This is a woman who, suggested she supported violence online against Nancy Pelosi prior to getting elected, who's talked about political violence, who's accused the Clintons of murdering people, who's accused Democrats of killing Republicans, which is incitement, who has claimed 9/11 may not have happened at the Pentagon. When you put someone like her on a committee like that, that's a conscious choice by Kevin McCarthy. We can dismiss him as kind of craven, coward, etc. But behind the scenes, these people know what they're doing, right? They're not oblivious to what they're doing when they're behind closed doors making these decisions, dangerous decisions.
No, that's exactly it. And the problem with it, strategic, they all are calculated in exactly what they're doing and how they're choosing these committees. And like this deal was cut behind the scenes. And it is atrocious. And it's also, it's a national security risk to our country. This woman will likely have a clearance. So, I mean, how do you even take any of this seriously? And when the next domestic terrorism incident happens, what happens if it's a far-right group, which it likely will be? What happens when it's the Oath Keepers or the Proud Boys that are showing up at, school board meetings again and threatening people? What happens when they do that? Will there be an investigation by this committee? Will they have a serious discussion on domestic terrorism? Likely not, right? I mean, that's not what is happening here. And I think this is incredibly dangerous.
Jared, one last question to you. Just yesterday, while discussing your new book, you told an interviewer, quote, extremist thinking has found purchase not just with a political party, but with literally millions, if not tens of millions of Americans and people around the world. Data analysts like Robert Pape at the University of Chicago agree. He says it's more than 20 million people here in the States. We saw many more last week in Brazil. How does this end? How do we stop it?
Well, I think that it begins with us understanding that this is an actual threat. For years now, people have downplayed this. They've said that Donald Trump was the problem, and if only he was defeated in 2020, this would go away. But it is not. This is a metastasized problem, and we have to realize that this is a homeland security threat. It is a domestic terrorist threat, and until we start making it unbearable for these people to spread these conspiracy theories, to raise money off of it, and to use it for their own ends, it's going to continue to grow as a problem. We have to take this seriously, and we have to start getting to the root of it.